and welcome to The Grim. I'm your host, Kristen. On today's episode, we'll be opening the gate and entering Greenwood Cemetery, located in Brooklyn, New York. So grab your favorite mug, cozy up, and let's take a dig into history. A city where dreams are made with endless sights to behold, New York transforms in the winter when blankets of snow unveil magic in everyday life. Even the most ordinary sights take on fresh allure, including the city's burial grounds, and none is more captivating than Greenwood Cemetery. Situated at 25th Street and 5th Avenue near its northwest corner, the cemetery's distinctive double main gate is anything but ordinary. Designed by Richard M. Upjohn in a striking Gothic Revival style and constructed from brownstone, entering this resting place feels like an occasion, marked by its splendor and breathtaking architecture. The grounds of Greenwood Cemetery are steeped in history that predates its founding, having been the site of a key moment in the American Revolution, the Battle of Long Island, also known as the Battle of Brooklyn, fought on August 27, 1776, just weeks after the United States declared independence on July the 4th. It was the largest battle of the war in terms of troop deployment. British forces commanded by General William Howe decisively defeated General George Washington's Continental Army, securing control of New York City, a critical strategic port that remained under British control during the duration of the war. Following the Continental Army's success at the Siege of Boston, Washington moved his troops to New York City to defend its critical harbor. Anticipating a British attack, he established defenses on both Manhattan and Long Island. In July, General Howe landed his troops on Staten Island, assembling a force of 32,000 soldiers. On August 21st, British forces arrived on Grayson Bay in Brooklyn and launched an attack 5 days later. Using a flanking maneuver, Howe's forces surrounded the Americans, causing panic and significant losses. About 20% of Washington's troops were killed or captured. A valiant stand by 400 Maryland and Delaware soldiers prevented greater casualties. The remaining Continental forces retreated to Brooklyn Heights, where Washington orchestrated a daring overnight evacuation of his entire army to Manhattan on August 29th to the 30th, avoiding further losses and preserving the American fight for independence. Today, Battle Hill, also known as Gowan's Heights, within Greenwood Cemetery, honors this history. The altar to Liberty Minerva, a bronze statue by Frederick Ruxall, was erected in 1920 atop the hill, which stands 216 feet above sea level. The statue faces the Statue of Liberty across the New York harbor, symbolically connecting the cemetery's historical roots to the enduring ideals of liberty and those who sacrificed their lives in the name of it. Established in 1838, Greenwood Cemetery was designed during the era of rural cemeteries, characterized by lush gardens and artistic landscapes, lining the pathways to loved ones' resting places. The cemetery was described as Brooklyn's first public park by default, long before the creation of Prospect Park or even Manhattan's Central Park. Its popularity inspired the competition that ultimately led to the development of New York's famed Central and Prospect Parks. In 1866, New York Times architect critic Paul Goldberg wrote, "It's the ambition of the New Yorker to live upon Fifth Avenue, to take his airings in the park, and to sleep with his fathers in Greenwood." Spanning 478 acres, Greenwood is the final resting place for nearly 600,000 souls. Its grounds boast rolling hills, serene ponds, an on-site chapel, and 7,000 trees, a stark contrast to the concrete surroundings of New York City. The cemetery's landscape features retain much of the original naturalistic design by landscape architect David Bates Douglas. These features are named evocatively, such as Camilla Path, Halcyon Lake, Oaken Bluff, Sylvan Cliff, and Vista Hill. The original curving road system, street names, and cast iron perimeter fence remain intact, although the many roads have now been paved. The cemetery has expanded multiple times over the years, with new sections carefully landscaped to harmonize with the original design. However, the northern area near Fort Hamilton Avenue, acquired later, stands out for its flatter terrain, differing from the rolling hills and dales that characterize much of the cemetery. Today, Greenwood attracts approximately 300,000 visitors annually, whether to pay respects to loved ones or to explore its rich history and breathtaking scenery. Still an active burial ground, the cemetery is nearing capacity, though, leading some families to resort to layering burials in shared plots to conserve space. Despite these challenges, Greenwood remains a tranquil and historic sanctuary, a testament to remembrance, beauty, and the many stories it holds. Its vast grounds house an extraordinary range of individuals, from the famous to the forgotten, each contributing to its rich tapestry. One such story is that of Horace Greeley, a resident who rose from humble beginnings to leave a lasting legacy. His life embodies the transformative possibilities of perseverance, symbolizing the rags to riches journey that has inspired generations. Greeley was the founder and editor of the New York Tribune. Born in New Hampshire, he began his career as a printer's apprentice without any idea of what the future was in store for him. When his employer shut down in 1831, Greeley set out for New York City with just $25 and his belongings tied in a handkerchief. There he worked for various printing and editing jobs before founding the New York Tribune in 1841, a newspaper he would lead for the remainder of his life. Later in the 1850s, the Tribune had become one of the most influential newspapers in the country, especially in the rural North. Despite his journalistic success, though, Greeley yearned for a political career. He briefly served in Congress as a Whig from 1848 to 1849, but faced repeated defeats in subsequent elections, including bids for the U.S. House of Representatives, Senate, and even the presidency. His political ambitions culminated tragically in his 1872 campaign for president as the nominee of both the Democratic and liberal Republican parties, advocating leniency toward the South, equal rights for all races, and governmental integrity. Greeley became a target of fierce criticism. He was mocked as a traitor, crank, and ridiculed by cartoonist Thomas Nast, who nicknamed him Horace Greeley. Adding to his misfortunes, his wife of 36 years died just 2 weeks before the election. Greeley was decisively defeated by Ulysses S. Grant and returned to the Tribune, only to find that Wycliffe Reed had taken control of the paper. On his deathbed weeks later, Greeley reportedly confronted Reed with his characteristic bluntness, exclaiming, "You son of a bitch, you stole my paper." When later asked about Greeley's final words, Reed diplomatically claimed they were, "I know my Redeemer liveth." Horace Greeley's funeral on December 4th, 1872, drew an outpour of mourners. President Grant, members of his cabinet, and governors from 3 states were among those who attended to honor the man remembered as a beloved public figure and an impassioned advocate for justice and reform. So we have the rags to riches, what about a pig farm to a medical office? Thus was the life story of Susan McKinney-Stewart. Stewart was a trailblazing physician and advocate who broke barriers in medicine and social reform. Born in Weeksville, Brooklyn, she spent her early years on her father's pig farm at Fulton Street and Buffalo Avenue. A gifted musician, she studied under leading Brooklyn organists and later taught music in Washington, D.C.'s public schools for 28 years. She also led the choir and played the organ at Bridge Street at AME Church in Brooklyn. Driven by desire to confront greater challenges, McKinney-Stewart pursued a career in medicine. She was admitted to the newly established New York Medical College for Women, graduating as valedictorian in 1870. Her achievement made her the first Black female doctor in New York State, and only the third in the United States. She opened medical offices in Brooklyn on DeKalb Avenue and later in Manhattan, where she provided medical care to undeserving communities. In 1881, she co-founded the Brooklyn Women's Homeopathic Hospital and dispensary at Myrtle and Grand Avenues. Her commitment to education and advancement continued as she served on the medical staff of her alma mater, pursued postgraduate studies at Long Island Medical College, and worked as a resident at the Brooklyn Home for Colored Aged. From 1892 to 1895, she also served on the institution's governing board. In 1890, Dr. McKinney-Stewart joined Wilberforce University in Xenia, Ohio, as a resident physician and faculty member, a role she held until her death. Throughout her life, she was deeply engaged in social reform, actively participating in temperance and women's suffrage movements. She married twice, first to Reverend William McKinney, who passed away in 1895, and later to U.S. Army chaplain Theo G. Stewart. Dr. Susan Smith McKinney-Stewart's legacy endures as a pioneering physician, educator, and advocate for equality and justice. Some individuals, however, found their lives in New York ending far less fortunate than they had begun. Such was the unusual and tumultuous story of Lola Montez. Born in 1821 in Limerick, Ireland, as Marie Dolores Eliza Rosanna Gilbert, Lola Montez lived a life as dramatic as the performances that made her famous. Raised in Scotland and educated in Bath and Paris, she was set to marry Sir Abraham Lumley, a 60-year-old judge on India's Supreme Court, at the age of 15. To escape the arranged marriage, she eloped with Lieutenant Thomas Janes of the British Army and accompanied him to India. However, their marriage was short-lived, and a year later she left her husband and began performing in Paris as a Spanish dancer, Lola Montez. Lola's stunning beauty, daring personality, and eccentricities captivated audiences and attracted the attention of notable figures, including the Tsar Nicholas I, Franz Liszt, and Alexander Dumas, with whom she reportedly had affairs. She continued to make a name for herself in Munich, where she performed in ballet and pantomime. Her relationship with King Ludwig I of Bavaria elevated her status even further. The king made her his mistress, provided her with a palace, an annuity, and noble titles such as the Baroness of Rosenthal and Countess of Landsfeld. She wielded such influence over Ludwig that she became his chief political advisor, but her power provoked unrest, culminating in a revolt that forced Ludwig to abdicate in 1848. After fleeing Bavaria, Lola married another British officer in England, only to face bigamy charges from her first husband, now Captain James. Escaping the scandal, she sought refuge in Spain and later immigrated to the United States in 1851, going to New York, Boston, Philadelphia, New Orleans, San Francisco, and even Australia. She mesmerized audiences with her infamous spider dance, where she would spin wildly and mimic shaking spiders from her petticoats. Her defiance in social norms, flair for self-promotion, cosmopolitan background, and extraordinary beauty made her a sensation, captivating both the urban elite and miners of California. By 1856, Lola embarked on a lecture tour in America and Europe, speaking on topics like women, love, and spiritualism. The endeavor proved less successful than her stage career, and she returned to New York disheartened. In her later years, she turned to religion and devoted herself to helping outcast women, but she spent her final days in poverty. Lola Montez's life, a blend of scandal, artistry, and rebellion, made her one of the most fascinating figures of her era. Upon her death in January of 1861, New York Times described her as eccentric, brilliant, and impulsive, reflecting the legacy of a woman who lived boldly and unapologetically on her own terms. Another resident of Greenwood who defined his own life and broke boundaries is none other than Leonard Bernstein. Born in Massachusetts to Jewish immigrants from Russia, Leonard Bernstein defied his father's wishes to join the family's beauty supply business, instead pursuing a career in music. After studying music and graduating from Harvard, he worked under the guidance of Sir Skvoodskivsky at Tanglewood during the summers of 1940 and 1941. Skvoodskivsky became a pivotal mentor to Bernstein, who in 1943 was appointed assistant conductor of the New York Philharmonic. Bernstein achieved instant fame on November 14, 1943, when he stepped in for ailing Bruno Walter, delivering a stunning performance that captivated audiences. Over the next 5 decades, Bernstein became a towering figure in the world of music. His first symphony, composed in 1943, earned the New York Music Critics Circle Award for Best New American Orchestral Work. In 1944, his Broadway musical On the Town enjoyed a successful run over a year. Bernstein's crowning achievement came in 1957 with West Side Story, a groundbreaking collaboration with Stephen Sondheim that redefined the American musical. The same year, Bernstein was named co-conductor of the New York Philharmonic and, in 1958, ascended to the role of music director and chief conductor, a position he held until 1969. Renowned for his versatility, Bernstein became one of the most sought-after guest conductors in the world, serving as a conductor laureate for both the New York and Israel Philharmonics. Alongside his achievements as a composer and conductor, Bernstein became a transformative figure in music education. He televised young people's concerts in the 1960s, brought classical music to millions, cementing his reputation as the most influential music educator of his time. A gifted pianist and theatrical conductor, Bernstein's charisma and passion left an indelible mark on the music world and the generations he inspired. Tucked into the hills surrounding Crescent Water Lake at Greenwood Cemetery stands the elegant mausoleum for William Neblo. The Neblo Mausoleum is undeniably one of the most striking and picturesque landmarks in Greenwood. Yet its tranquil facade belies a colorful history. This mausoleum once hosted the most scandalous parties in Brooklyn. William Neblo was a renowned theater impresario and owner of Neblo's Garden, a popular pleasure theater that opened in 1828 at Broadway and Prince Street in Manhattan. Neblo's Garden was a hub of entertainment, featuring dancers, fireworks, live music, and other lively spectacles. A prominent New Yorker, Neblo secured his mausoleum at Greenwood long before his death in 1878, treating it not just as a final resting place, but as a venue for lavish gatherings. He hosted wild parties on the lawn surrounding his mausoleum, much to the annoyance of the cemetery's management at the time. Today, the Greenwood Cemetery has embraced Neblo's flamboyant legacy, hosting events inspired by the lively spirit of Neblo's Garden, keeping his tradition of celebration alive amidst the serene beauty of the cemetery's grounds. If you're looking for a bit of Egyptian inspiration and near Brooklyn, you might not need to make the long trip to Egypt, but to Greenwood instead. Known as the Van Ness Parsons Mausoleum, this mausoleum is an actual pyramid. While Egyptian influences were prominent in the Art Deco design, this mausoleum is a striking blend of Egyptian revival and Christian symbolism. At the entrance, visitors are greeted by depictions of Jesus Christ, holding a lamb, and the Virgin Mary cradling the infant Jesus. To the left, another female figure, possibly a pharaoh's wife, discovering baby Moses, adds to the narrative. Adjacent to Mary, however, stands a friendly sphinx, and Egyptian vulture wings frame the mausoleum's doors, creating a unique eclectic fusion of cultural motifs. The mausoleum is a resting place of Alfred Ross Parsons, a celebrated pianist, music teacher, and Egyptologist, who passed away in 1933. Parsons, author of New Light from the Great Pyramid, a work exploring the geographical discoveries of ancient Egyptians, was deeply fascinated by Egyptian culture. His final resting place, a pyramid, is a fitting homage to his passion. He's interred alongside his wife, Alice Scheuer Van Ness, who predeceased him in 1931. Together, they rest in a beautifully unconventional structure that bridges ancient Egyptian and Christian traditions. When walking within the grounds, visitors might come across a bare gravestone marker that's as unusual as it is adorable. This striking grave, adorned with a bronze bear, marks the final resting place of William Holbrook Beard, a celebrated cartoonist and illustrator. Beard is best known for his iconic depiction of bears and bulls battling on Wall Street, a theme symbolized by the bear that now sits atop his tombstone. Despite his prominence as an artist, Beard, who died in 1900, was originally buried in an unmarked grave within his family plot at Greenwood Cemetery. The lack of recognition for such a notable artist caught the attention of Greenwood historian Jeffrey Rickman and gallery owner Alexander Azevedo, who previously created a retrospect of Beard's work. Together, they placed a 2-page advertisement in Antiques magazine, inviting proposals for what they called a tomb for the unknown, well-known artist. Sculptor Dan Ostermiller responded enthusiastically, creating a bronze bear sculpture and generously donating it to the cemetery. The sculpture was installed in 2002, finally giving Beard's grave the tribute it deserves. Some stories of Greenwood's residents are tinged with tragedy, yet beautifully memorialized. None more so than the poignant tale of Charlotte Canda. On the evening of her 17th birthday in 1845, debutante Charlotte Canda's life was tragically cut short. Returning home from her glittering coming-out party along Fifth Avenue, a thunderclap startled the horse pulling her carriage. The panicked animal bolted, and Charlotte was thrown violently to the ground. She died moments later in her father's arms, her life extinguished on what should have been her brightest day. Charlotte had been meticulously designing a tomb for her recently deceased aunt, pouring her youthful creativity into its details. Heartbreakingly, those very designs became the blueprint for her own grave. Stricken with grief, her father devoted himself to creating an elaborate memorial for his beloved daughter at Greenwood Cemetery. Completed in 1848, Charlotte's tomb quickly became one of Greenwood's most visited sites. By the 1860s, her name and tragic story were immortalized in poems and songs. The Gothic style memorial, rich with symbolism, measured precisely 17 feet by 17 feet, 1 foot for each year of her brief life. Under a canopy of stars, a statue of Charlotte stands surrounded by roses, symbolizing the cruel loss of a young woman in the bloom of her youth. If not tragic enough, the grief of her fiancé, Charles Albert Gerard de la Marie, was too great to bear. A year after Charlotte's death, he took his own life. Denied burial in consecrated ground due to the stigma of suicide, he rests just outside the boundaries of Charlotte's grand memorial, a poignant reminder of a love that ended in heartbreak and loss. Together yet apart, their tragic tale lingers as one of Greenwood's most haunting stories. One of the most romantic and heartbreaking tombstones in Greenwood Cemetery captures the final husband's goodbye to his wife. On the morning of August 3rd, 1857, Charles Griffin kissed his wife Jane farewell before leaving for work. Tragically, it was the last time he would see her alive. Jane suffered a fatal heart attack later that day at the age of 40, and it was Charles who discovered her lifeless body upon returning home. Determined to honor their love, Charles commissioned a tombstone designed by Patrizio Patiti, which immortalized their parting moment. The sculpture depicts Charles bidding Jane farewell on the steps of their home, their loyal dog standing watch beside them, a poignant symbol of devotion. This beautifully crafted monument has become one of Greenwood's most cherished landmarks. According to legend, Charles visited Jane's grave often, his grief undiminished with time. He was finally laid to rest beside her 25 years later, reunited with a love he never forgot. Not of all Greenwood's history is a story of prosperity and transformation. Some chapters confront the darker realities of the past, such as segregation of race that persisted even in death. A poignant reminder of this history is found in 7 burial lots, once designated by cemetery officials in the 19th century as the colored lots. This term, while reflective of the era's language, underscores the systematic racial discrimination and segregation that shaped society at the time. Today, efforts are underway to confront this legacy and restore dignity to those interred in these lots. Interns working to preserve this area have proposed renaming it the Freedom Lots. This new name honors the memory of the individuals who may have been enslaved, their descendants, or free people of color who endured continued racial oppression long after slavery was abolished. It also stands as a powerful reminder for the fight for freedom, equality, and justice. The ground's history as a battlefield makes it a fitting place for tributes and honoring veterans or soldiers from wars within. This really started in August of 2002, when Greenwood Cemetery took a pivotal step in honoring its military heritage by rededicating New York City's Civil War Soldiers Monument on Battle Hill. During the event, conversations with reenactors and participants revealed a deep interest in the stories of Greenwood's permanent residents who served in the military. Inspired by this enthusiasm, historian Jeff Rickman launched Greenwood's Civil War Project with the goal of identifying and honoring Civil War veterans interred within the cemetery. Initially, it was expected that several hundred veterans might be found, but the project soon grew far beyond those expectations. Since its inception, hundreds of volunteers have dedicated their time and skills to this endeavor. To the date, the project has identified an astonishing 5,200 individuals who served in the Civil War in the military, political, and social welfare roles. Each veteran's story has been researched and documented, resulting in short biographies that are now accessible online in Greenwood Cemetery site. For approximately 2,200 veterans whose graves were previously unmarked, the cemetery secured headstones provided by the Department of Veterans Affairs, ensuring their final resting places are properly commemorated. Encouraged by the Civil War Project's unprecedented success, Greenwood's expanded its efforts to honor veterans to other conflicts. In 2017, coinciding with the centennial of the United States' entry into World War I, attention turned to the veterans of the world to end all wars. Nearly 200 biographies of World War I veterans are now available online. In 2021, the focus shifted to World War II veterans. With the help of descendants who generously shared stories and photographs, almost 400 biographies have been documented, including those of women who served as Rosie the Riveters, nurses, and military personnel. Many of those biographies are accompanied by extraordinary photos, soldiers in uniform, wedding scenes, and funerals, offering a vivid glimpse into their lives. Most recently, Greenwood began researching veterans of the Revolutionary War. In December of 2023, the cemetery honored Ebenezer Stevens on the 250th anniversary of his participation in the Boston Tea Party. Stevens, interred in Greenwood, is the only known participant in the Tea Party buried in New York City. Recognizing his importance, the cemetery initiated a broader search for the Revolutionary War veterans interred at Greenwood. This task has been particularly challenging, since those veterans died before the cemetery's founding, having them reinterred from other burial grounds with limited demographic information. Despite these hurdles, about 60 individuals who have played a role in the War of Independence have been identified. The work continues, though, within Greenwood, now expanding its efforts to include veterans from other significant historical events, such as the War of 1812, the Mexican-American War, the Spanish-American War, and even service in Iraq. These projects now reflect a commitment to preserving the legacy of those who served and ensuring their stories are remembered for generations to come. Within Greenwood Cemetery lies a grave that honors a seldom told chapter of wartime history, the story of women on the battlefield. This is the tomb effigy of Margaret Corbin, who is believed to be the first woman to fight in battle for the United States. On November 16, 1776, during the Battle of Fort Washington in northern Manhattan, Corbin joined her husband as a camp follower, a role many women took on during the American Revolution. Faced with the difficult choice of remaining home to defend their properties or joining their husbands on the march to perform domestic duties, these women were indispensable to the war effort. When Corbin's husband was killed in action, she stepped forward to man his cannon, loading and firing it until she was gravely wounded. Her courage earned her recognition from Congress, which awarded her a lifelong soldier's pension, an extraordinary acknowledgement for a woman of her era. In 1926, the Daughters of the American Revolution reinterred remains believed to be Corbin's at the Military Academy in West Point. However, a 2017 archaeological study revealed the remains did not in fact belong to her, leaving the location of her true resting place unknown. The sculpture at Greenwood ensures her legacy endures, sparking reflection on the contributions of women in war and their representation in public monuments. Greenwood's tales include the less scrupulous as well within. It's home to some of history's most infamous and controversial figures, each with a story steeped in notoriety and scandal. Among them is Albert Anastasia, the fearsome head of Murder, Inc., the enforcement arm of the crime syndicate. Nicknamed the Lord High Executioner, Anastasia is believed to have personally carried out around 30 murders. Nearby lies Harvey Birdo, a scandalous dentist known for allegedly trading dental work for sex. Birdo's murder in 1857 became one of the 19th century's most sensational cases, and his likely killer, Emma Cunningham, is also buried at Greenwood. Another infamous figure is William Poole, better known as Bill the Butcher, a violent gang leader of the Bowery Boys, and a member of the Navitist Know-Nothing Party. His nickname reflected both his brutal fighting tactics and his trade. William Boss Tweed, the infamous politician whose corruption epitomized Gilded Age greed, is also interred here. Tweed was so infamous that he was recognized from a newspaper cartoon while attempting to flee the country. Finally, Ward McAllister, a self-proclaimed arbiter of New York high society, rests in the cemetery's catacombs. McAllister is best remembered for curating a list of the city's 400 best families, and for his disdain for the middle class. Together, these figures represent some of the darker, more scandalous chapters of New York's history, immortalized within Greenwood's grounds. Greenwood Cemetery is home to numerous notable monuments and mausoleums, reflecting a variety of architectural styles, including classical, Egyptian, Gothic, and Romanesque. Many of these were designed by prominent architects of their time, such as Milan Lafleur, Richard Upjohn, and Warren and Whitmore. The tombs often feature intricate sculptural decorations, showcasing the artistic trends of their eras. According to the National Register of Historic Places, these monuments fall into four main categories: those commemorating events or professions, those of architectural significance, graves of historical significant individuals, and monuments of sculptural interest. Over time, it also garnered a reputation for paranormal activity, attracting both ghost hunters and history enthusiasts. One notable site within the cemetery is Brooklyn Theater's Fire Monument, which commemorates the tragic 1878 fire that took 278 lives, the largest loss of life in New York City until September 11, 2001. Many victims were interred in a mass grave at Greenwood. Some visitors and paranormal enthusiasts believe the spirits of these individuals linger near the monument, contributing to the cemetery's haunted reputation. Adding to the cemetery's mystique is the Tomb of Secrets, an installation where visitors can leave their confidential thoughts, entrusting their secrets to the grave. This unique feature enhances the enigmatic atmosphere of Greenwood, inviting contemplation of the unknown. While these elements contribute to Greenwood Cemetery's eerie allure, these of course are just claims and so far haven't had much evidence behind them. The cemetery continues to be a place of historical interest and reflection, with its reputed hauntings adding to its thematic charm. The cemetery's grounds, although beautiful any time of year, appear even more magical covered with snow, adding to this charm and eerie allure while softening death's call to the living. The Grim will absolutely be back to Greenwood Cemetery, as we've barely covered many of its permanent residents with fascinating stories. Greenwood, for now, will continue showing visitors that death is indeed a continuation of life, etched in stone. The Grave Grind for Greenwood Cemetery is a sticky toffee pudding latte from Stumptown Coffee Roasters. For more honorary grinds in the area, please visit the-grim.com. For now, we're closing the gate on Greenwood Cemetery. We hope you enjoyed our dig into history. If you did, subscribe today to join us next time when we open the gate on the Grim.